Nor did they only exert spiritual power. Some have wielded such might that they rivaled the most dominant medieval kings. Popes have issued laws, ruled on disputes, much to the ire of Henry VIII, and held the threat of excommunication over men like a Damocles sword. The incumbent Holy Father is the 266th Pope, a role that has come to stand as both religious leader and champion of interfaith dialogue. But as with any fated office, its past has seen some colorful moments. Find out more with our infographic guide to popes and the papacy. How long are popes in office? Traditionally the pope is in office for life, though that's not always the case, most recently with Benedict XVI, who resigned from the Holy See in 2013. The average papal tenure is 7 years, with the longest held by Saint Peter, AD 30 to 64, who was pope for 34 years. The shortest incumbent was Urban VII, who was pope for 12 days, from 15 to 27 September 1590, before succumbing to malaria. How are popes chosen? Popes are elected by the College of Cardinals at a meeting called the conclave. Sealed in a suite of rooms, the cardinals are not allowed to connect with the outside world except through the burning of their ballot papers twice a day. White smoke means a new pope, black that the debate rages on. Voting is not always swift. Following the death of Clement IV in 1268, it took 3 years to elect his successor. What's the most popular papal name? Leading the field is John, with a moniker adopted by 21 pontiffs, though confusingly, there has already been a John XXIII. That's no mistake. Firstly, the 10th century Pope John XVI is considered an anti-pope, more on that later, so he was skipped and John XVII became the 16th Pope to take that name. Also, there was never a Pope John XX, as Peter Giuliani, the 19th to take the name John, decided to skip to John XXI. This was due to a mistaken 11th century belief that there had been a pope named John between the anti-pope Boniface VII and John XV. Filling out the rest of the top 10 are Gregory, 16 popes, Benedict, 15, Clement, 14, Innocent and Leo, 13 each, Pius, 12, Stephen, 9, and Boniface and Urban, 8 each. What's the average age of a pope? On election, the average age of a pope is 67 years old. 2 sbritelli pontiffs are tied for the youngest, both John XI, AD 931-35, and Benedict IX, first term AD 1032-44, became pope at 20. It's tie at the elder end of the scale too, with both Clement X, 1670-76, and Alexander VIII, 1689-91, taking up residence in the Vatican at the age of 79. Did a pope call the First Crusade? Urban II, 1035-99, issued the call to arms that led to the First Crusade. At the 1095 Council of Clermont, he urged Frankish Christians to aid the kingdom of God, which, it is said, was met with the cry of Deus vult, God wills it. What were the Papal States? From AD 756 until 1870, the Pope was the sovereign of a swathe of territory which, at its greatest extent in the 18th century, accounted for much of central Italy. The popes of this era ruled these papal states like kings, were active in the local politics and even went to war with their neighbors. Its death knell was the Italian reunification, after which the papacy was granted a smaller base in Rome, the Vatican. Has the Pope always lived in Rome? Not at all. For 67 years, the papacy resided in Avignon in France. Clement V, 1305-14, moved the papal court to this French city in 1309, beginning what has been described as the Babylonian captivity of the papacy. Clement and 6 popes to follow him were all Frenchmen, and most were considered to be under the sway of the French crown. What was the Western Schism, and has there ever been more than one pope? From 1378 to 1417, there was a split in the Catholic Church, now known as the Western Schism. During this period there were often two popes. In 1410, there were three. Gregory XI, 1329–78, returned the papacy to Rome in 1377, but died the following year, and Urban VI, 1378–89, was elected in his stead. Within 5 months, the cardinals were so disillusioned with Urban that they returned to Avignon and elected a rival claimant, the anti-pope Clement VII. The Catholic world fractured in support of rival popes, who frequently excommunicated each other. Who was the first anti-pope? You might think that the idea of an anti-pope was a result of the Western Schism, but that wasn't the case. The first was Hippolytus of Rome, who died in AD 235. Can anyone become pope? Not anyone, but, as is popularly imagined, you don't need to be a cardinal to be voted pope, though most are. Any baptized man is eligible for the papacy. There have been at least 4 popes who were legally married before taking holy orders: Saint Hormisdas, 514–523, Adrian II, 867–872, John XVII, 1003, and Clement IV, 1265–68, though Hormisdas was already a widower by the time of his election. The legitimate children of John XVII and Clement IV, 3 sons and 2 daughters respectively, all entered religious orders. The story of Adrian II is more tragic. When he was appointed pope at the age of 75, both his wife, Stephania, and daughter lived with him in the Lateran palace, but were abducted and murdered by a man called Eleutherius. Have all popes been good? Not always. These 5 popes all unleashed holy moly. Alexander VI. Alexander VI, 1492–1503, is synonymous with iniquity. He was one of the few popes to acknowledge his illegitimate children, was flagrant about promoting his own family's interests, and was surrounded by rumors of murder, poisoning and incest. Benedict IX. 3-time Pope Benedict IX is the only pontiff to have sold the papacy, which he did to end his first term in 1044. The price is not recorded. Boniface VIII. Power-hungry Boniface VIII, 1294–1303, issued a bull declaring that every human creature be subject to the Roman pontiff, including kings. He also annoyed the poet Dante so much that the pope can be found in the 8th circle of hell in Inferno. Urban VI. Urban VI, 1378–89, moaned that the cardinals he was having tortured on suspicion of plotting against him were not screaming loud enough. Stephen VI. Stephen VI, AD 896–97, really didn't like his predecessor but one, Formosus. He dug up Formosus's corpse, redressed it in papal finery and sat it on a throne, then subjected it to a trial. The inevitably guilty corpse was found to have acceded to the papacy illegally. Stephen cut off Formosus's blessing fingers, reburied him as a layman, then exhumed him a second time and tossed him into the river Tiber. From the death, or more rarely, resignation, of a pope to the famous white smoke drifting out of a Sistine Chapel chimney, the centuries-old process of electing a new pope is defined by ritual and ceremony, but also secrecy. Taking place behind closed doors, it falls to an assembly of cardinals, a conclave, to vote for the new head of the Catholic Church. What happens when a pope dies? The death of a pope has to be confirmed by a medic, but it is only official once a particular action is taken by the camerlengo, the cardinal who oversees the running of the Vatican's property and revenue. The camerlengo calls out the pope's baptismal name 3 times, and only when he receives no response can he declare the death. Traditionally, the camerlengo have also tapped the pontiff's head with a silver hammer. He then notifies both senior church officials and the general public. The pope's apartment will be locked, according to a historic practice that prevented looting, and preparations are made for the symbolic destruction of the pope's ring and seal, signaling the end of his authority. The pope must be buried between 4 and 6 days after the death, while the official period of mourning is observed for 9 days. Not long after that, the cardinals gather for the conclave. A conclave is the gathering of cardinals summoned to the Vatican to elect a new pope. Not all members of the College of Cardinals, the most senior clergy of the Catholic Church below the papacy itself, are eligible to participate due to age restrictions. The word derives from the Latin for with a key, referring to how the cardinals are literally shut away from the wider world while they vote. Conclaves nearly always take place in the event of a pope's death. Since Gregory XII in 1415, there has only been one papal resignation, Benedict XVI, who, in 2013, left the Holy See citing his advanced age. Why are the cardinals shut off from the world? The conclave is held in the highest secrecy, well away from public glare and with the cardinals isolated from any potential external influence. Even the two non-cardinal masters of ceremonies must leave before voting commences. For the entire duration of the conclave, the assembled cardinals must remain in a sealed-off section of the Vatican. They have no access to televisions, radios, newspapers, or mobile phones, and must take, along with members of Vatican staff, an oath of secrecy, on threat of excommunication. The process was brought to life in the 2024 film Conclave, helmed by All Quiet on the Western Front director Edward Berger and starring Ralph Fiennes and Stanley Tucci, and based on the best-selling novel by Robert Harris. It follows the workings of a fictional conclave, one filled with scandal and even deeper secrets, but still helps us to see behind the doors of this peculiar and sometimes controversial procedure. Who votes for a new pope? Not all cardinals are permitted to participate in a conclave. In November 2024, there were more than 230 members of the College of Cardinals around the world, but the maximum number of who can vote is 120. This goes back to 1975, when Paul VI changed the rules so that no cardinal over the age of 80 could be in a conclave. The College of Cardinals have held the responsibility of electing a new pope since 1059, when the process was reformed by Nicholas II. Prior to that, the Pope, officially known as the Bishop of Rome, was most likely elected by local clergy and churchgoers, and often under the influence of the Roman emperors and then Holy Roman Emperors. Who can be elected as Pope? In theory, any Baptist male Catholic can become Pope. In practice, however, the College of Cardinals always makes their choice from within their own number. The last head of the Catholic Church who was not previously a cardinal was Urban VI, who was elected in 1378. Where are most popes from? Of the 266 popes there have been to date, 217 were born in Italy. The remaining pontiffs have come from 14 other countries, mostly France, 16. The only Englishman to head the Catholic Church was Adrian IV, who held the office from 1154 to 1159. How do cardinals elect a pope? Once gathered from all around the world, the cardinals enter the Sistine Chapel. This is the venue for the conclave. 9 cardinals are randomly selected for particular roles during the election, 3 scrutineers count, check, and announce the votes, 3 infirmariae deliver the ballots of any cardinals whose ill health prevents them attending a round of voting, and 3 revisors double-check the work of the scrutineers. A round of voting, or scrutiny, consists of 2 masters of ceremony distributing paper ballots. They and the other handful of non-cardinals permitted in the Sistine Chapel must then exit. Each cardinal writes the name of their preferred candidate on their ballot, disguising their handwriting, and folds the paper twice, before walking to the chapel's altar, placing it on a paten, a plate used during the Mass, and sliding it into a chalice. As they do so, they declare, "I call as my witness Christ the Lord who will be my judge that my vote is given to the one before God I think should be elected." The collated ballots are examined one by the scrutineers, one whom reads the name on each ballot out loud and another pierces them with a needle to attach them onto a single thread. They are counted to see if any candidate has received the required 2/3 share of the vote. If no one achieves this majority, further rounds of voting will continue until there is a new pope. After a single vote on the first day, there can be 4 ballots per day. It is forbidden for a cardinal to openly campaign, but discussions in between rounds can assist particular candidates in building support. Finally, the ballots from a failed scrutiny are burned, giving off black smoke to let those outside the Sistine Chapel know that the conclave continues. How long does a conclave take? A conclave will last as long as necessary to secure the election of a new pope. During the last century, the quickest came in 1939 when Pius XII was elected in the third ballot, although the fact that the College of Cardinals only consisted of 62 eligible voters presumably helped the swiftness of the process. The longest conclave in history was held in 1268, or, at least, it began in 1268. Political infighting meant there was no result for nearly 3 years. During that time, 3 cardinals died and frustrations reached such a level that the local magistrate removed the roof where the conclave was being held and limited the cardinals to bread and water to force them to agree on a decision. How is a new pope announced? Smoke emanating from the Sistine Chapel chimney is still the first way that announcements from the conclave are made. While black smoke means a failed vote, white smoke means there is a new pope. The different colors are achieved by burning certain chemical mixtures. This is followed by the ringing of the bells of St. Peter's Basilica. Meanwhile, the candidate with the 2/3 majority must formally accept the result of the election. They will then select their papal name, before preparations are made for them to appear on the St. Peter's Basilica balcony for his first blessing. When conclaves go wrong. The 13th century conclave that lasted nearly 3 years was far from the only time that a papal election did not go to plan. The election of 1378 was accompanied by rioting in Rome from those calling for the new pope to be Italian. They were concerned that most of the cardinals were French. Although Urban VI was elected, there was a split in the church, the Western Schism, which saw 2 popes, one in Rome and the other in Avignon. Further civil discord erupted during the conclave of 1559, with protests against one of the strongest candidates after it was revealed he had fathered a son. The election took almost 4 months before Pius IV became the new pope. That was despite the fact that he had children of his own. He successfully kept their existence a secret. Thank you for watching this video.